fiat money now. Nobody's on the gold standard, nobody's on the silver standard. Money is worth something because some country says it is, right? So it's backed only by the credibility of the government issuing it. And conversely, with certification, the value of the certification arises entirely from the credibility of the people in the organization that put forward the standard upon which it's based. So the ISTQB program, you've got 45 national boards, you've got dozens of people working in each of the national boards, you've got cross representation of academics, consultants, practitioners, trainers. You have people from a lot of different industries all participating to create and review these bodies of knowledge. So certainly it's not a perfect mechanism, but I would challenge anybody to come up with something better. And I would certainly say that it's much better than the alternative, which honestly, if you look across the other certifications, most of the time it's the Council of Self-Appointed Wise Men, right? You've got 4 or 5 people that have said, we are the masters of testing. We're going to define the body of knowledge. We're going to define how this stuff is done. And there's no tapping what's sometimes now referred to as the wisdom of crowds involved in the process, right? There isn't any listening to the market, listening to a broader representation. We've done that in the ISTQB, and I think ultimately this, the test of the proof is that there are 120,000 certificates that have been issued. So clearly this is providing value to somebody because a lot of people have spent time and energy and money getting certified, and so I think that demonstrates the value. So to go to questions from this session, we have one, and this is a good one from Haibu. In DDE, does the test defects figure include the defects found in unit testing by development? Great question, and the answer here is, well, it depends on what you're trying to measure. If what you're trying to measure is the defect detection capability of the entire software engineering process, then you would certainly include that, along with any other defects that were caught anywhere else. But if what you're trying to measure is the defect detecting capability of the testing process, and here I'm talking about the system test team at the end, then no, you would not include those because those were found and hopefully removed before they got to you. But it's an important question to ask. Ask yourself, what am I trying to measure here? Because if you don't think about that and you include things you shouldn't include or exclude things you shouldn't exclude, then your measure will not be valid. Tan asks, will the presentation be available for download? So for those of you who came in before or after the intro, yeah, absolutely. Presentation not only will be available, it is currently available for downloads on the rbcs-us.com website on the basic library page. In addition, a recording of either this session of the webinar or the one that was earlier in the day will be posted on the website so that you can actually listen to the presentation as well as reading the presentation. Marie asks, which of your books do you recommend for self-assessment of the testing process? Well, that would be Critical Testing Processes. That's the one that is most applicable for self-assessment and includes a lot of different things to look at. So I would say pick up a copy of that and work your way through it. And it's very, very detailed, so it should be real clear to you of these are the things that I need to consider. And there's even a hypothetical case study in there that tries to illustrate the different steps of the processes being carried out properly so that you can relate to it in a realistic manner as well. Okay, Indra asks, can we rely on metrics to assess the overall quality of a product? Is it a good practice? Well, yes, absolutely. I've been talking in this presentation primarily about process metrics, measuring the capability of a process. But certainly we can look at metrics to assess the quality of the product itself. One example would be the pie chart that I showed earlier that measured the residual level of quality risk on a product. So that's a measure of quality of the product and how at risk are we. the cumulative bugs found and fixed chart, or the granddaddy of all testing charts, where you graph how many bugs have we found in testing and how many have been fixed, and you look for convergence of those and a leveling off of the bug find rate. That's another good practice. Now, it's definitely important, and I'm going to do a presentation, as I said, about testing dashboards, where, and this is a later webinar if you want to tune in for that. Definitely important to have balance in your metrics, because if you just pick one or two metrics, it's usually pretty easy to figure out a way to game the metric. In other words, to manipulate things so it looks like you're doing really well. And so, make sure whatever set of metrics you pick, whether you're measuring the quality of the product or the project and where you stand on the project, or the process and the capability of the process, in any of those three areas, any set of metrics that you would pick should be balanced so that it is not possible to game them. We have a question from Zumana. Do we have to use special tools in the testing process? If we don't use a tool, does our testing fail? What's the risk here? Well, no. You don't have to use tools in many situations, but there are some situations where you do have to. So, for example, performance testing. It's really not possible in most situations to do meaningful performance testing manually. So if you're called upon to do performance testing, you need a performance testing tool. But for most forms of functional testing, many forms of functional testing, you can get away with doing this manually. The problem that you're eventually going to run into if you're testing some product that is evolving over time, you're going to run into the regression problem. So as new features are added and as changes are made to this product, you need to retest not only the things that were added and changed, but also everything that was there before to some extent. This is what drives a lot of organizations to adopt tools like Quick Test Pro, for example, and other kinds of test automation, functional test automation tools. It's not so much that they're interested in testing functionality, that they're interested in testing regression of functionality. So you should never think of, oh, I need to be doing automated testing because it's cool, or I'm not a real tester unless I'm doing automated testing. It's more a matter, again, as I was talking about at the outset, if you've got a nail, you need a hammer, right? So if you're in a situation where you've got a problem, like regression, like performance, like reliability that you need to test for, you're going to need a tool. And so, try to think of it that way, Zamana, rather than, I'm not cool, I'm not hip, I'm not a good tester if I'm not doing automated testing. Question from Karthik here. Is there any specific best practice to be considered for testing under Agile Scrum methodologies? Well, I've got a 90-minute answer to this question, which is called the recorded webinar that I did on this issue of Agile testing challenges. So I would, rather than try to get into this here, I'd say just go out to the website and take a look at the presentation that I did, or listen to the webinar that I did on Agile testing challenges. You can also find, there's an article that I wrote on it. It's in the most recent edition of Testing Experience magazine. So go to testingexperience.com and download that. It's an article called Agile Testing Challenges, imaginatively enough. And that's an excerpt from my latest book, Managing the Testing Process, 3rd edition. And that talks about what you need to think about to deal with Agile and Scrum. Now, Indra's got a follow-up here. Relying on metrics may lead to the wrong assessment too, which can lead to making wrong decisions.